Welcome to Crimson Clues, where shadows hide secrets and silence reveals the truth. Every story is a puzzle, and every clue takes you closer to the answer. Subscribe now, join the hunt, and let the mystery begin. Chapter 1. The Danube Gala. Budapest, I must admit, was not a city I anticipated to admire. I imagined a grey outpost of the empire, complete with barracks and officials with thick moustaches. Instead, I encountered a city of light and colour, with domes glittering above the Danube, bridges strung like necklaces over the water, and a nightlife that surpassed Vienna in both brilliance and indiscretion. Poirot had known it for a long time. "My friend," he added as our car sped along Andrassy Avenue, "Budapest is a city where appearances are cultivated like orchids in a house. Look closely. Hastings, and you'll see the decay that feeds the bloom." I wanted to tell him that I'd rather enjoy architecture than check for rot, but we'd arrived at our destination, the Royal Opera House, which was ablaze with chandeliers. That evening, a gala concert was planned to commemorate the presence of several noble families, none more magnificent than the Loans. It was almost certainly thanks to Poirot that we ended up where we did. He had been contacted by a specific baron about misplaced jewelry. The diamonds were discovered at once, stashed behind a false drawer. Poirot's fees, as usual, were understated yet hefty. In appreciation, the baron insisted on Poirot and his prominent English acquaintance attending the gala as his guests. Inside the vast lobby, we were carried away by a flood of fur, silk, and perfume. The Hungarian nobility was out in force, their orders and decorations shining like constellations. I confessed to feeling quite dreary in my evening attire, but Poirot, pristine as ever, appeared to have walked directly from a fashion plate. It was then that I noticed her. Countess Vilma was not tall, yet she carried herself with such regal confidence that it seemed as if the chamber had been designed specifically for her. She wore a black velvet gown that flared into scarlet at the hem, as if the fabric itself smouldered. A rope of rubies twisted around her throat, yet her lips gleamed brightly, scarlet, purposeful, the type of mouth that men feared and emulated. Heben mumbled Poirot, his eyes narrowing. "There is the Countess. Rhaegar Hastings is a woman used to both adulation and distrust. Take note of the slant of the chin. She has already heard the talk and she lives on it." "What is the gossip?" I inquired almost too excitedly. "The usual, mon ami. Affair, debt, and intrigue. They say her spouse, Count Lon, is bankrupt, yet clings to his dignity like a drowning man to a branch. Meanwhile, the Countess dances at salons, laughs too loudly and writes too much. Voila the perfect recipe for scandal." I attempted to laugh. Scandal is seldom uncommon in society. "True," said Poirot thoughtfully, "but scandal is accompanied by beauty." "Oh, that is flammable." We were quickly led to our seats in a box, not far from the Loans. The performance that arouses Verdi appeared destined to be a success, but I was distracted by the drama in the crowd rather than the one on stage. The Count, a stern figure with greying hair, sat stiffly next to his wife. He applauded respectfully, but his gaze never left her. She, on the other hand, leaned forward, giggling uncontrollably at the gentleman in the adjacent box's words. Her gloved hand rested briefly on a champagne glass, which was then quietly returned to her spouse. A sleek young man stood discreetly at the back of their box, too polished for a servant, and too unusual for a visitor. He kept his eyes down and took brief notes on a folded program. Poirot, I saw, looked at him once but said nothing. During the interim, Poirot excused himself to speak with one of his acquaintances. I stood in the corridor, observing the flow of gowns and uniforms. I heard a voice behind me. "Are you the English officer, Captain Hastings?" I turned to face the Countess herself. Up close, she looked much more menacing, with dark grey eyes that seemed to appraise and dismiss in the same gaze. I stammered, "Enchanting. Then you must amuse me because my spouse has been captured by politicians, and I despise politics." She drew me a few steps away, her perfume surrounding me like a spell. "Captain, are the English always so loyal?" "I hear you're following Mizzy Poirot like a shadow?" I answered hesitantly, "Well, Poirot and I have seen a lot together." Her lips curled. "A shadow is frequently more informative than the figure it represents. Remember that?" With a slight laugh, she walked on, leaving me with the strange sensation of being both toyed with and admonished. The second act began. Halfway through, a murmur spread among the audience. I looked across and saw the Count slumping in his chair. His head leaned to one side. The ruby glass he was holding tumbled and smashed at his feet. Cries sounded out. The orchestra struggled briefly before coming to a halt. The Countess awoke with a scream that appeared too flawless for spontaneity. The servants raced forward. The performance devolved into anarchy. By the time Poirot and I arrived at their box, Count Lon was beyond help. A physician, summoned from the stalls, pronounced him deceased. Apoplexy, he added, though his voice lacked confidence. Poirot bent briefly over the shattered glass. He observed the wine stain on the carpet, touched the rim of the goblet that was still in the Countess's hand, and nodded slightly. "Pro?" I whispered. "What is it?" He did not respond right away. His gaze was fixated on the Countess, who stood absolutely composed now, one hand pressed to her throat, her lips crimson against the pallor of her face. Finally he whispered, "The kiss of death, Hastings. It is on the glass, but whose lips placed it?" That we must discover. The audience had already started to whisper. "Poison," somebody muttered. "The Countess. Look at her mouth, the stain." Poirot straightened, his expression impassive. "Come on, Hastings. We must act promptly before chatter turns into an accusation. In a city like this, a whisper is more deadly than poison." As we left the opera house under the cold stars of Budapest, I felt a chill, not from the night air, but from the Countess herself. Did she kill her husband with a kiss, or had someone else managed to turn her inherent allure into a weapon? Pooh's eyes glowed in the dark. "Mon ami," he said quietly, "tonight we witnessed not only a death, but also a meticulously planned design. The true pattern remains hidden, but the threads are already tightening." Chapter 2, The Whispering City. Budapest awoke that morning to murmurs, rather than the normal clamor of trams and the swirling mist of the Danube. There was only one issue discussed at cafes and markets, salons and shops: Count Lon's death at the opera gala. Hand in every whisper, like a pearl catching the light, Countess Wilma's name shined. I myself was finishing a rather good breakfast at the Hotel Halle when I overheard two gentlemen at the next table. "She kissed the glass herself," one whispered on stage. "Scarlet lipstick on the rim. What additional evidence do you require?" The other chuckled grimly. "Evidence? Mon Dieu. In Hungary, evidence comes after talk, not the other way around. Mark me. Before the end of the week, she will be condemned in salons from here to Vienna." I couldn't control myself. "A moment, sir," I said, leaning over. The Count's death was not established to constitute a crime. He may have had poor health. They gazed at me as if I had stated that the Danube flowed uphill. "An Englishman," one murmured, and they resumed their conspiratorial tones. I informed Poirot, who entered in the dining room pristine as always, his moustaches positively shining. He listened without astonishment. "Just so, Hastings. Gossip is like smoke. It spreads quickly. It blackens ceilings and is extremely difficult to contain." "Do you believe she is innocent?" I asked. Pooh shrugged softly. "I believe nothing." "But I observe. Come, let us begin." Our first stop was Café Gerbeau, which had gilded ceilings and chandeliers, and every table was buzzing with conjecture. Poirot took a seat where he could see the room. He ordered the unavoidable hot chocolate. "I prefer a more practical coffee." A young waiter approached, bowing low. Poirot gave him a warm smile. "Marty," he told me, "went to the opera last night. Were you present?" The boy nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, monsieur. During the break I helped out in the corridor. After the Count there was commotion and screams, and before the interval the boy paused, then whispered, 'I saw the Countess. She was laughing with a gentleman with tall dark hair and a scar on his chin. She handed him her glove to kiss. When her husband appeared, she took it back. They argued quietly, but you could see the fury in her eyes." Pooh tilted his head. "You have the most precise recollection here. Please accept a token for your trouble." The boy left and Poirot sipped his cocoa. "Do you hear, Hastings? We already have passion, conflict, and jealousy. It's the oldest recipe for murder." "But who was this gentleman?" I asked. "Patience, he will emerge." "Have no fear." Later that morning, we were asked to meet with Inspector Kovac of the Budapest police. He was a strong man with a crimson face, the air of someone whose tolerance had already been tested. "Monsieur Poirot," he declared frankly, "this is neither Belgium nor England. We do not construct subtle tapestries. The Count has died. His wife inherits. Her lipstick is on the glass. What else is required? Poe spread his hands. May we, Inspector, it is tidy. It's simple. Nesper, your explanation may be overly simplistic. Where there is much order, one must suspect arrangement. Kovac snorted. Arrangement or not, society requires a perpetrator. They point at the Countess. Unless she can provide a reason, she will be tried soon. Then, Poirot gently added, it is good for Madame the Countess that Hercule Poirot is here. That afternoon we called on the Countess herself. Her home, a beautiful mansion overlooking the Danube, was surrounded by interested visitors. Inside she greeted us with complete calm. The same sleek young man we'd seen standing discreetly in the Lonia box the night before now led us into the drawing room. He introduced himself as Mus Julian Karkis, the Count's secretary, before departing with the ease of someone used to being both present and unseen at the same time. Pooh's eyes followed him out with silent curiosity. This time she was clothed in all white, with the exception of a single pearl at her neck. The result was stunning, resembling a contrite angel more than a siren. Messier, she murmured with a tiny tilt of her head. You've come to question me like the others. Poirot bowed. I've come to listen, madame. That is rarer. She looked at him steadily. Then listen carefully. I didn't kill my husband. He was a rough man. Yes, we argued frequently, but poisoning and murder were not among them. It is underneath me. What lies beneath, madame? She gave herself a faint smile. Captain Hastings will affirm that I have endured scandal. They label me extravagant, disloyal, and reckless. Perhaps I am all of those things except a poisoner. Never. If I wanted to be rid of my husband, I should have left him. That's at least honest. Poirot's eyes glittered. And yet, madame, last night you placed your lips upon his glass. Her cheeks reddened. Yes, I admitted it, a gesture of reconciliation. Do you mock me? We argued before the gala. I intended to show him. I could be obedient in public. It was foolish. They now refer to it as a kiss of death. She turned away, her shoulders quivering, but I couldn't tell whether it was from pain or pride. Poirot softly questioned the gentleman with the scar on his chin. Who is he, madame? The Countess was silent for a moment before saying with a low laugh, You see too much, Mr. Poirot. Very good. His name is Major Andras Farkas, and he's just a soldier and a friend. My husband despised him, which made me all the more eager to chat with him. But I swear to you, he's innocent. Poirot's moustaches twitched. We will see, madame. We will see. As we left the house, I couldn't contain my rage. Well, surely you don't think she's guilty. She appeared so sincere. Pooh gave me the expression of infinite tolerance. Mon ami, sincerity is a performance like any other. You are too easily fooled. Consider the facts. The lipstick-stained glass, the public fights, and the potential lover. Against her is the chatter of the city. Nothing matters to her, except perhaps the truth. And what's the truth? Poirot smiled slightly. Ah, Hastings, that we must discover. But I already see one thing. This crime, if it is a criminal, was not the result of pure calculation. None, it was born out of passion, and passion always leaves its trace. We walked along the river as the sun sunk low, illuminating the Pest domes and Buddha hills across the water. The Danube gleamed indifferently, transporting whispers as easily as barges. A murderer was sitting behind one of those shuttered windows, listening as well. And I couldn't get rid of the sight of the Countess's scarlet lips on the glass, the kiss that doomed her in the eyes of the people. Chapter 3, The Soldier Speaks. Major Andras Farkas greeted us at the Honvey Officers' Club, an austere structure, with a faint scent of boot polish, pipe smoke, and the varnished past. The Major stepped forward in his crisp grey uniform, heels together, hand to brow, and relaxed into a smile that I suppose would have routed an entire salon of skeptics. He was a gorgeous man, broad at the shoulders and slim at the hips, with a thin white scar that notched his chin and added a touch of romance to his otherwise pleasant face. When he shook my hand, his grip was solid, and I admit I liked him right away. Poirot, on the other hand, observed him with the kind attentiveness that is his most dangerous weapon. You honor us, Major, replied Poirot. Not at all, Farkas responded in superb French. The honor is mine. Monsieur Poirot, Hungary has long admired your work from afar. We're curious to see it up close, he said, pointing to leather chairs near a tall window that framed the Danube, like a steel-coated ribbon. A waiter deposited coffee with military efficiency. Farkas denied both sugar and wine, adding with a smile, Do you comprehend the concept of discipline? Poe's eyes swept lovely and inexorable. Discipline is admirable. It also chafes. You are very familiar with the loans, Major. I knew the Countess, he said, and then, as if hearing himself, he countered socially. Our rings overlap. You were spotted with Madame during the intermission, remarked Poirot. A glove was offered, then withdrawn. A little domestic weather, maybe. The Major's mouth constricted. Budapest enjoys the storm. I had no wish to supply one. And the Count detested me. This is true. He disliked people who spoke to his wife without her permission. I think that habit is unmanly. Poirot said, You will forgive. If I perceive that jealousy is incredibly manly. Farkas curtly described jealousy as a child's sickness. Honor is what fascinates me. The Count had a title, but honor was another matter. He possessed a soldier's ability to strike attitudes without appearing to pose. Hastings, I told myself, should not admire the man just because he appears good beside a window. Poirot inquired quietly last night. Where were you when the Count fell? Farkas said, In the corridor with my aunt, my late father's sister, who will confirm that I escorted her to the cloakroom. I heard cries, returned, and witnessed the commotion. I didn't enter their box. Pooh sipped his chocolate. You didn't drink, Major, I rarely do. Yet you wear a little burgundy on your glove, remarked Poirot, so gently that even I began. The Major gave a downward gaze. His buff leather gloves rested on the table, fingertips nicely aligned. A tiny black crescent appeared on the right glove, at the base of the index finger, more purplish than brown. He did not flush, he smiled. The dangers of a packed gala as your Poirot. In the crowded corridor, a gentleman's glass came into contact with my hand. I did not retaliate. I'm old-fashioned. Tam, said Poirot, what about the sugar? What about the sugar? There is a dusting on your left glove, Poirot observed softly. It glows a little in the light. Not salt sugar. You do not sweeten your coffee, yet it is here. Farkas looked at the glove, then his countenance lightened. Oh, my aunt takes 2 lumps. I unwrapped the paper twist for her at dinner. Excuse me, it's scarcely a mystery. Poe's fingertips formed a miniature church for themselves. Hardly, he repeated, and a tiny smile tugged at his moustaches. I could not ascertain if Farkas had slipped or saved himself. It appeared to me that opening sugar for a lady was simply the kind of commonplace act that a man does without thinking about, and exactly the kind of detail that a professional notices without fail. Major said, Poirot, You claim the Count disliked you. Why? Because he was unhappy, Farkas stated simply. And miserable persons require foes. If a husband is not kind, he should be respectable. The Count was neither. He exhibited his grievances while counting his coins aloud. You mentioned financial problems? I state it. He was enmeshed with men who lend but do not forgive, and they were constantly on his side. Your monsieur cares. What about the secretary? I claimed we saw him last night. Farkas laughed briefly and scornfully. Secretary, certainly, but in Budapest such men keep more than just ledgers. The Count's properties were deeply in debt. Cares knew every creditor and every secret. I believe he grasped the Count's keys more tightly than the Count himself. He hesitated and said with a biting tone, Perhaps he dreamed of holding more than just the keys. I immediately understood the connotation. The Countess. Farkas's mouth constricted. Admiration is inexpensive in this city. He admires her without a doubt. Slender men with shiny shoes always do. But she would never give her heart to a clerk. Envy takes many shapes, Captain Hastings. Do not underestimate him. Poe tilted his head. Then if the Count had died normally, it would have been convenient for some, but very inconvenient for others. Farkas responded, That is often the case, but I am not an accountant. I simply cared that the Countess would not be. He paused and the soldierly mask moved. Shouldn't it be, Major? I asked gently. Shamed, he said after a heartbeat. Humiliated in public. I spoke to her in the corridor for that reason alone. And yet, Poirot whispered, the city speaks of the Countess's lips more than the Count's debts. A wife's kiss is more expressive than any ledger. Farkas' hands closed lightly and the gloves creaked. It is obscene, he stated. She is innocent. You are certain? He met Poirot's stare without flinching. Yes, then tell me this, said Poirot quietly. During the break, you spoke with the Countess. Farkas hesitated a fraction. I cautioned her to use caution. A curious word, observed Poirot. Caution in her instance denotes peril. What form did it take? Farkas exclaimed. "No more of those public dramas." The Count enjoyed arguing in front of an audience and then forcing a reconciliation afterwards. It turned their marriage into a performance. I told her not to give him the satisfaction. Poirot, however, stated that Madame attempted reconciliation. She placed her lips on his glass. Farkas leaned closer, his voice quiet yet angry, because she is fearless. Monsieur Poole, you can't imagine her strength. She will stand tall in front of a room full of people who dislike her and refuse to budge. The crowd believes it sees a scandal. In reality, it perceives her disobedience. That is her courage. Something in his tone suggested more than admiration, something dangerously near to worship. I found myself admiring it, which made me immediately doubt my own judgment. Pooh's demeanor remained respectful. One more indiscretion, Big. The scar on your chin. How was it earned? Farkas said abruptly. Saber practice. Cadet days. It reminds me to strike cleanly and protect what counts. Pooh's eyes fluttered. And yesterday night, after the weeping, I returned as I promised. The Countess stood frozen, her hand pressed to her throat. A doctor strode past. The shattered ruby glass lay on the floor, with the stain spreading. That's all. Nothing more, nothing. Pooh rose, smooth as ever. You have been really gracious with your time, Major. Allow me to make one minor observation. You claim you don't consume sugar, yet you have a habit of opening it for ladies. Yes, chivalry exists, but repetition creates a habit, and habits can occasionally turn into opportunities. Farkas held his gaze steady. If you think I poisoned a sugar dish, you are mistaken. I never came near the Launier box. I don't kill husbands. Some guys, observed Poirot softly, would never dream of it, but act out of the heat of their hearts. Others have nighttime dreams about it and are resistant. The major difference is both subtle and significant. Farkas's jaw tensed, then relaxed. Monsieur Poirot, I admire your expertise. I also respect my own temperament. Had the Count raised his hand against her in public, I might have struck. But he didn't, so I didn't. Are we finished? For today, said Poirot, bowing. On the pavement outdoors, the wind from the river found every space in one's clothing. I pulled my coat closer. Poirot is a fine fellow, with honest eyes and a solid tone of voice. Poirot greeted Hastings pleasantly. You might excuse a wolf if he had well-brushed fur. You don't suspect him. I suspect everyone. It is the only way to stop injustice. Poirot described the wine stain and stated that the sugar is instructional. Let us consider. A man who takes pride in his discipline, who avoids sugar and wine but carries a small amount of both on his gloves. His explanations are plausible. They're also convenient. You think he lied? I think he edited, Poirot remarked. And yet if he lied, it was to protect someone else, not himself. Mark that, Hastings. A man rarely polishes his own alibi with such precision. We walked for a while, the trams banging, the city brilliant and uncaring. Across the river, domes and spires rose like sleeping beasts. Assume I speculated that the poison, if there was any, was in the sugar. Then anyone who opened a packet would get the dust on their fingers, continued Poirot. Yes, but we must not leap. Cyanide generates its own gossip. Other drafts are sheer. We are awaiting the inspector's report. Meanwhile, we need to enlarge the circle. Who do we see next? A woman who knows everyone's secrets and shoes. Madame Milona Siculi. However, there is one last task to complete before heading to the salon. He turned down a narrow street, where a chemist's brass plate glowed discreetly. Inside, the air reeked of campfire and quiet efficiency. The apothecary, a thin man with small moon-shaped lenses, bowed. Good morning, Mauro. How can I be of service? Poirot spoke from memory. Last week you supplied Count Lon's household, but naturally we prepare their household remedies. The Count had a tonic. A tonic, said Poirot. Based on the man spread his hands. Bitter herbs, a little caffeine, a very little digitalis under prescription, of course. I felt a small unpleasant sensation between the shoulder blades. Digitalis, heart. Yes, an excellent servant, a wicked master, said the apothecary cheerfully. Poirot's eyes became very mild. And for Madame the Countess, a powder for the nerves. Harmless bergamot and sugar to make it pleasant. He hesitated. We also sold her a lipstick last month. The French shade the lady's favor. Ah, said Poirot, lady tie. We thanked him and returned to the street. You see, Hastings, murmured Poirot, how the shop of the apothecary writes a novel without lifting a pen. You think the tonic, I think nothing. But I observe that a man who drinks a tonic with digitalis should be careful what else kisses his glass. And I observe further that powders for the nerves travel well in a lady's reticule, and sugar is the friend of bitter things. We reached the corner where the wind came sharply round and drove a breath from me. If the Count took digitalis, I said, then a small additional dose masked in wine could persuade a weak heart to hasten its departure, said Poirot. Just so, but who supplied the persuasion? The doctor, a secretary with debts, a lover with chivalry, or the lady whom the city already condemns? You cannot think she. I think, said Poirot gently, that innocence must be proved with more care than guilt is alleged. Come, Hastings, we will dress for Madame Sheke's salon. In such rooms the truth does not speak. It leaks. He linked his arm in mine, and we set off through a city that had already converted last night's tragedy into today's entertainment. I found myself picturing the Major's steady hands, the dark crescent on the glove, and the tiny sparkle of sugar in the winter light. Ordinary things, as Poirot says, are never ordinary. Behind us the river moved on, grey and secret, carrying with it whatever the night had not yet told. Chapter 4. The Salon of Madame Cécile. In every great city there exists one house where secrets gather as naturally as dust upon velvet. In Budapest that house belonged to Madame Ilona Szécsi. Widowed at 40, wealthy at 41, and notorious ever since, Madame Illa possessed the rare gift of being invited everywhere while being trusted nowhere. She thrived on scandal as others thrive on oxygen, and she dispensed both with the ease of a hostess pouring Tokaji wine. It was into this formidable salon that Poirot and I were ushered on the afternoon following our interview with Major Farkas. The drawing-room was crowded, officers with bristling moustaches, ladies with plumes that trembled like antennae, and younger men who lounged with the studied indifference of cats. Everywhere there was the hum of speculation, the Countess's name darting from lip to lip. Madame Milona, magnificent in purple silk, bore down upon us at once. "Monsieur Poe," she cried, "at last Budapest is worthy of gossip with substance. Sit, sit, Captain Hastings. You shall have coffee. But careful, it may be poisoned." She threw back her head and laughed, and a dozen admirers echoed it. Poe bowed gravely. "Madam, your salon is the thermometer of the city. Tell me, what fever does it record today?" Her eyes sparkled. "Why, the fever of romance, naturally. Poor Count Lon, so dull, so parsimonious, and so very dead. And the Countess are to drink from his glass with those lips, and then poof, the man falls. Delicious, is it not?" I murmured something about tragedy, but Madame Ella waved a jewelled hand. "Tragedy, my dear Captain, is simply scandal with tears added." "No, no, do not frown. You wish for facts, then I shall give them. Last night, during the interval, I saw a gentleman lurking near the lyre box. Not Major Farkas, though heaven knows she let him hover often enough, but another, a doctor, I think, tall, thin, with a case in his hand. He watched her as if she were a patient or a sin. Poirot tilted his head. Dr. Miklos Varadi. Madame clapped her hands. Exactly. The physician to half of society and confidant to the other half. What he does not prescribe, he whispers. Mark me, Miss Muro. The Countess has more than one admirer. Pooh's eyes fluttered. And you, madame, do you think she returned their admiration? Of course she did, said Ilona with relish. A woman like Wilmer does not live on admiration alone. She breathes it. She drinks it. But love she gave to only one. And the tragedy is that none of us agree on who that was. A servant discreetly summoned us to a smaller salon where Dr. Vard awaited. He was a tall man, neat in frock coat and cravat, his face aesthetic, his eyes deep-set. He greeted us with chilly courtesy. "You have questions, Mr. Poirot?" "Only a few," Poirot said smoothly. "The Count was your patient." "Frequently," said Vad. "He suffered from a weak heart compounded by excess. I prescribed digitalis in small controlled doses. Nothing remarkable." Poor tapped a finger. "And Madame the Countess?" Vad's face shifted minutely. "For her powders for the nerves. Society can be unkind to women. I merely wish to ease her suffering." "You cared for her," Poirot murmured. The doctor's mouth tightened. She is a remarkable woman. Any man would admire her, but I am a physician. My concern was her health." "Her health?" said Poirot softly. "And yet you were seen in the corridor during the interval." "Observing her. Why?" Varad's hands moved restlessly. "I was summoned by a servant. The Count had complained of faintness earlier. I lingered nearby lest he should need me. That's all. Of course, said Pooh, eyes bright, and after his collapse I was among the first to reach him. But it was too late. Heart failure, nothing more. Poirot bowed. Mercy, Doctor, you have been most clear. Yet as we departed, I whispered, do you believe him? Poirot shrugged. Clarity, Hastings, is often the foggiest thing in the world. As we left the townhouse, the bells of Pest told the hour. The city was ablaze with gossip. Every lamplit window a theatre for speculation. I turned to Poirot. So, what do you make of them? Poirot breathed a small sigh. Each man circled the Countess as a moth circles a flame. Each says the truth and conceals it. Major Farkas's commitment, Dr. Varad's reserve, and Mia Kirkis's calculations. Hastings has 3 men, but only 1 heart beats for her. To find out which is the essence of the crime. Our final call that day was to Julian Kerikis, the Count's secretary. Madame Seculi had intimated with a pointed smirk that no one knew more about the Loniers' affairs than the young guy with the smooth voice and even smoother hair. Julian Caris welcomed us in a study that may have served as a counting house. Every pen was aligned and every ledger was square. Even the blotter was unblemished. He rose easily and greeted us, sleek, dark-haired, polished and distinctive, yet ever appearing meek. The Count trusted me in everything, he stated at once. His affairs were convoluted. Complicated? Paul repeated. You mean his debts? His expression flickered. Debts? Yes, additionally there are investments. He had a big appetite. I did what I could. And if he had died normally, Poe asked softly, would those events have bothered you? Some, yes. Others would fall on the Countess. She is inexperienced in business. I merely wanted to safeguard her. You admired her, said Poirot. Carrick's smile tightened. Which man in Budapest does not? But appreciation isn't a crime, Mr. Poirot. My loyalty was professional. Poe tilted his head. Last night at the opera, monsieur, you were not in the Count box. Caris said, I had business. During the downtime, I went to a clerical area to prepare telegrams for Vienna. A creditor pressed. I stayed there till the clamour began. Poirot's moustaches quivered, but he just murmured, Curious, monsieur. Curious indeed, merci. He bowed and we withdrew. As we grabbed our jackets in the hall, the domestic servant who attended us made an almost apology-like comment. Murkus informed you he was busy with telegrams last night, sir, but none were ever provided to me to send. Poe bowed his head sadly, as if such trivialities were the natural language of murder. Outside, the lamps on the street had begun to glimmer, throwing long wavering lines over the Danube. The city was rife with speculation. Laughter echoed from cafes, but behind each flash of joy there appeared to be a whisper of the Countess' name. Poirot moved silently for a few paces, his small figure tidy and confined against the river mist. Finally, he added, Hastings, 3 things do not agree. A wine-stained glove, a doctor who stays in the corridors, and a secretary with unwritten telegrams. When you put them together, you'll see a pattern. However, one piece is still missing. He said nothing more, and we strolled through the fog, the city's noise at our backs, the mystery increasing with the night. Chapter 5, Shadows, Sugar and a Soldier. The morning in Budapest had taken on a Sunday air. The trams clanged like church bells. The Danube looked its best in grey, and the newspaper lads yelled scandal in almost reverent tones. Poirot committed himself to his chocolate while drinking coffee at the Galilee, as if he were reading a confidential report. Inspector Kovat entered the drawing-room with the casualness of a butcher. Monsieur, he declared, settling into a chair that complained loudly. We like basic meat over sauces. Here's the simple beef. According to the doctor's preliminary findings, Digitalis is capable of stopping both prudent and irresponsible hearts. Tear, Poirot said softly. So the weak heart was helped to get weaker. Kovac waved a square hand. We'll have the finer numbers this afternoon. Meanwhile, society has already executed the Countess. If you want to save her, you must show me someone better to hang. Inspector Poirot stated that one must first see how before deciding who. Bah, replied Kovac, but with a smile on his face. In pest control, who pays for the how? He left amid a flurry of civic impatience. Poirot placed his cup with subtle finality. Come, Hastings. This morning, Papless, we confirm things. We'll start with Major Farkas. I must admit that I was pleased with it. The Major's solid voice and soldier's back had impressed me, and as Poirot frequently points out, I am a very terrible judge of people, and thus insist on judging them constantly. We located Farkas at the officers' club, near the same window that framed the Danube like a blade. He rose as we approached, the white scar on his chin striking the light like an exclamation mark. "Mr. Poole," he stated crisply. "Captain, you will excuse Poirot's verification routine. Your aunt was with you during the gap. Could we speak with her?" "Certainly," Farkas responded immediately. "She has a late breakfast. I'll take you." It's tough to despise a man who volunteers for his aunt. We were then shown to a modest flat off a clean square where Major Farkas's aunt resided. One of those tenacious Hungarian ladies who appear to have been born sitting bolt upright greeted us in a regiment of doilies. "Your nephew accompanied you to the cloakroom?" Madame asked Poirot while bowing. "He did," she said, in that exhilarating contralto that indicates that all assertions are either proven facts or crimes. "He takes great care of me." The passageway was really busy. I loathe crowds. They breathe on you, and someone spilt a red drink on Andrus's glove. I chastised him for not retaliating, but he's old-fashioned. Farkas allowed himself a smile. "Do you drink your coffee?" "How are you, madam?" Poirot murmurs. "With sugar," she replied quickly. "2 lumps. My late husband would have taken 3, which was both a weakness and an extravagance." Andrus opened the paper twist for me, as he usually does. People no longer know how to fold paper correctly. "You have an excellent eye," observed Poirot with approval. "You will excuse an unusual question. Did you notice the Lonia servant passing through the crowd with a tray?" "I saw nothing I wanted to see," she remarked bluntly. "But a small man wearing spectacles tried to squeeze past us carrying glasses. I told him if he broke one he could purchase it. He looked at me as if I had offended his forefathers." Poirot's head sank slightly, as if a small inner abacus had recently clicked. "Madame, you have the exactitude." Farkas accompanied us down the stairs from the corridor. "You see," he said, "there is nothing save that you opened the sugar, that your glove tasted wine but did not drink it, and that you are a guy who confuses discipline with immunity," remarked Poirot softly. "Major, I will be honest. You have the air of someone who would fight a duel for a woman while pretending he wouldn't." Farkas paused. "If you mean I poisoned the Count, please state so." Poirot explained that a man who believes he is incompetent is sometimes simply untested. He let the words hang like small weights on a scale. We left the Major staring at the Danube, as if it had offended his regiment. I decided to protest. "Really, Poirot, that was a trifle hard." "My friend," he added patiently, "if he is innocent, he must be tested until his innocence proves beneficial." Now to the opera. The Royal Opera House in daylight looks like an actress spotted reading a smart book. It's almost embarrassing to be so respected. A hefty philosophical supervisor led us into the lyre box with the weary resignation of someone who has been lending keys to secrets. It was smaller than it seemed in the glitter of the gala. When one looked closely, the carpet still exhibited a faint, deeper sunburst where the ruby glass had fractured. Poirot crouched with the sleek certainty of a folded ruler. He took out a small paper envelope and with a penknife enticed 2 or 3 shimmering granules from the nap of the carpet. "Sugar," he whispered, "crushed fine." "Champagne," I recommended. "People do unusual things with sugar." He returned, hoping that we and bitter draughts would become close friends. He moved to the side table. It held 2 glasses, survivors, and a water carafe. Poirot carefully studied the rims, then used his own square of linen to remove a smudge off the foot of one glass. He held it up to the light. A smear lip rouge, not the Countess's colour. "Look, Hastings, the colour is warmer, more orange than blue." He smiled slightly. In a city where half of the ladies wear Paris, it's important to recognize which Paris. A quiet cough emanated from the corridor. It was the young waiter, the same boy from Gerbo, if I recall correctly, now in his appropriate habitat carrying a tray with the purity of original sin. "Pardon, Miss, you requested staff who were on duty." "I was in the hallway that night. The person with the scar passed away with an elderly lady. He carried her paper sugar since the twist was tight." He reddened. "One notices things." "Good," said Poirot. "And did anyone else enter this box during the interval who was not from the Lonia party?" The child thought, squinting his eyes to squeeze recollection. "A petite man, possibly a secretary with dark hair that has been well brushed. He knocked, entered, and exited swiftly. Then the doctor, lofty like a crane, he hovered but did not enter. After that there was a clink, as if one glass had touched another. Poirot's eyes became exceedingly bright. "Trebi, you will eventually receive a package of chocolates beyond your wildest expectations." Outside on Andrassy Avenue, the winter sun had arranged itself to appear historical. We strolled briefly in solitude. I said sugar, that stubbornly recurs, and a smear of lipstick that isn't the Countess. Then somebody painted a glass, or a gloved finger brushed it while quickly replacing glasses, explained Poirot. The audience sees the kiss on the rim and exclaims, "Aha, the lady." However, the lady did not wear that shade. He also tapped his pristine cuff. The Count's glasses were ruby. A little colour may forgive a little colour. Then it was the secretary, and I cried, relieved to have solved it. Take care with his neat lies and messy telegrams. Perhaps, continued Poirot, or a man who has a lengthy history of handling sugar and would not hesitate to dust a rim. Or a doctor, with a lengthy history of measuring droplets who would remember to bring a handkerchief he would not normally bring. I raised my hands to either the Archbishop or the conductor. One becomes dizzy. Good, remarked Poirot. Dizziness marks the beginning of balance. Dr. Varad, the physician, greeted us with a tired expression on his face. His study, which had smelt like ether the night before, now smelt pleasantly of boiled linen. On his desk was a stack of neat prescriptions, the uppermost of which was addressed to a lady of prominence. You will excuse a question of housekeeping, remarked Poirot. A bottle is missing from your shelf. The place remembers it. Vad's lips thinned. A small vial of tincture. I noticed the gap myself. Mr. Poirot, I do not keep poisons on the loose. No, answered Poirot, as if he had been instructed. Then somebody took it. Your servant. My servant, the doctor explained, has served me for 20 years and cannot take the sight of an uncorked bottle without a saucer. He didn't. Poirot kindly asked if it was a patient or a friend. Farad's hands on the desk tightened imperceptibly. If you wish to blame me, Poirot stated, I intend to determine if you are a fool or a lover. Either one could borrow a bottle. The murderer would bring his own. Varad's colour rose. You are impertinent. Frequently, said Poirot in a cheery tone. It prevents me from being unjust. Another quick question. Did you bring a nice lawn handkerchief with you to the gala that night? It's not your regular habit. Your cuffs reflect a man who dislikes frivolity. Farad's gaze flickered briefly to the arm of his chair, where a faint remnant of a white thread clung. I went to a gala, he answered coldly. One dresses appropriately. That is usually wise, according to Poirot, especially for people who do not want to leave fibres. On the way down the stairs, I dared to make a statement. You intended him to lose his fury. Poirot asked if he was concerned about the Countess or the bottle. He selected the bottle. It is interesting to me. By late afternoon, the city had traded talk for lamps. Poe sent a note to Keke, requesting a brief talk. The response was swift and evasive. He couldn't help but be fascinated by Buddha's accounts. When folks have nothing to hide, Poirot observed, they do not hide in Buddha. And the Countess? I inquired. He nodded. We go. The London mansion, with its iron gate and interested watchers, had drawn in on itself like a creature in the cold. We were immediately escorted to a smaller drawing room, where the Countess sat in a pool of lamplight. She wore black today, with no ornaments, yet the lack of colour did not diminish her. It exposed her bones of determination and pride. The jewel at her throat was gone. The throat had become the jewel. You return, Miss Monsieur, she said, not rising. Will you present the rope now, or just measure my neck? Poe bowed from the waist, as if she were a queen and he was a royal messenger. I returned to beg the truth. All I need is one truth, and I'll find everything else. She observed him. Ask. At the interval, he spoke quietly. You argued with your husband. After you resolved to, shall we say, execute reconciliation, you placed your lips over his glass, while her fingers tensed on the arm of the chair before gradually relaxing. That's what they say. It is what they observed, replied Poirot, but not what happened. She looked up sharply. The lamplight created a little point in each grey eye. Who told you? No one, said Poirot. The glass told me the colour was not yours, and her chin lifted slightly. I got the strangest sensation that she was waiting to be informed what she had done. Then we are finished, she replied with a grim little giggle, for it seems I cannot even be believed guilty of my own scandal. Madame, Poirot remarked gravely, the bravest thing a woman can do is allow herself to be underestimated, when it comes to protecting what needs to be safeguarded. Who did you protect? The door opened without ceremony, she said with a sad laugh. Innocent? The city noticed my lips on his glass. They'll whisper forever. Guilt is not limited to the act, Andras. Caracas mumbled, It is what people believe. Then all of my letters and falsehoods were wasted. Verratti bowed his head, marking my silence. Kovac let out a roar. And what should I report? That a man killed himself to humiliate his wife? The court will laugh me off. Pooh spread his hands. I give you the truth. Whether the world acknowledges it or not, that inspector is beyond Hercule Poirot. The Countess drew herself as tall. Let them say Vilma kissed her husband until he died. Better that than admitting I was merely his last joke. Kovac moved, but Farkas blocked his path. You shall not touch her, he growled, voice low and menacing. She placed her hand on his arm. Andras, allow them to do what they must. You cannot fight the entire city. His eyes burned. Then I will. I'd rather go down with you than see them devour you. She leaned in, her voice a whisper that only he heard. Live for me. That's harder. Outside, the frost was a touch sharp. The Danube shattered lamps into trembling gems. I went with Poirot shaken. So it was suicide. He poisoned himself to harm her. Poe smoothed his moustaches. We're Hastings. His final deed was vengeance, not release. He died, but he ensured that her independence perished as well. A man may love or hate, but pride consumes both equally. And will you inform the court? Poirot gave me a sideways glance. Tell them, perhaps, but will they believe it? Society prefers a gorgeous murderer over a bankrupt suicide. Monemy may not survive in pest salons. The city glittered behind us as we paused on the chain bridge. Poirot's tiny figure was still. He kissed the glass himself, murmuring, and that kiss contained pride, spite, and ruin. He caused the disaster, not she. However, she will take the punishment. Then he quickly touched my arm. Come have cake at Gerbo Hastings. Even in catastrophe, the stomach must be fed. And remember that sometimes the dead are the most heinous murderers. Epilogue at the station. We did not stay long in Budapest. Poe had no patience for gossip disguised as justice, and we were on the northbound train in a matter of days. The Danube ran beside us, restless and grey, carrying secrets that the city preferred to conceal. We stopped in Vienna for a day, and Poirot abruptly came to a halt on the Westbahnhof platform. A woman in black furs and a man in a plain military coat stood in front of us, flanked by the second carriage. She was veiled, but I recognized the lofty carriage of her head. He carried her vow with the awkward compassion of a man who prefers to carry her anguish. Madame la Comtesse, Poirot muttered. She turned as if she anticipated him. For a brief while, the four of us stood isolated from the station's bustle, porters, whistles, and steam. Then she bowed her head, not as a queen, but as a woman who had survived destruction. Messieurs, she said quietly, we are heading for Trieste. Perhaps father could be anywhere except Pest. Farkas' hand tightened around hers. He said, we're going somewhere where her name is just a name. There was no reason for speeches. Poe simply bowed, and in that gesture I sensed more gentleness than in all of his words that week. Then I wish you happiness, madam. Major. The guard's whistle sounded shrill. Farkas helped her get into the carriage. She leaned out the window one more time. Remember us kindly, she said. And the train pulled away, steam enveloping her face until she vanished. I found myself oddly moved. Poirot, I replied, do you think they will ever be happy? He adjusted his cuff while watching the carriages vanish. Happiness, Hastings, is not a matter of world approval. It is two hearts that beat together in spite of the world. For them, yes, I think it is possible. He gave a brisk little sigh. Come, we will leave them their exile. At Demel's they have a Sasha torture that is, if not as sweet as romance, at least less perishable. And so we left the lovers to their future, one written not in scandal but in their own choosing, music. And so concludes Poe and the Countess's kiss, a tale of appearances and pride, where a lipstick smear, a grain of sugar, and a carefully staged gesture proved louder than gossip, and Poe heard what vanity tried to hide. This story is our own invention, written in homage to Agatha Christie, and inspired by the real textures of Austro-Hungarian high society, its salons, scandals, and very public reputations. If you've listened until the end, thank you. Your presence, your reflections, and those simple gestures like comment, subscribe directly influence how the channel performs and what we're able to make next. I read what you share and try to reply whenever I can. If you'd like to support further, you can join our membership for ad-free episodes and extras, or leave a small tip via Buy Me a Coffee. Links are in the description. But truly, just being here and sharing the show is already a gift. Until our next mystery, good night, she said with a sad laugh. Innocent. The city noticed my lips on his glass. They'll whisper forever. Guilt is not limited to the act, Andras. Caracas mumbled, it is what people believe. Then all of my letters and falsehoods were wasted. Verratti bowed his head, marking my silence. Kovac let out a roar. And what should I report? That a man killed himself to humiliate his wife. The court will laugh me off. Pooh spread his hands. I give you the truth. Whether the world acknowledges it or not, that inspector is beyond Hercule Poirot. The Countess drew herself as tall. Let them say Vilma kissed her husband until he died. Better that than admitting I was merely his last joke. Kovac moved, but Farkas blocked his path. You shall not touch her, he growled, voice low and menacing. She placed her hand on his arm. Andras, allow them to do what they must. You cannot fight the entire city. His eyes burned. Then I will. I'd rather go down with you than see them devour you. She leaned in, her voice a whisper that only he heard. Live for me. That's harder. Outside, the frost was a touch sharp. The Danube shattered lamps into trembling gems. I went with Poirot shaken. So it was suicide. He poisoned himself to harm her. Poe smoothed his moustaches. We're Hastings. His final deed was vengeance, not release. He died, but he ensured that her independence perished as well. A man may love or hate, but pride consumes both equally. And will you inform the court? Poirot gave me a sideways glance. Tell them, perhaps, but will they believe it? Society prefers a gorgeous murderer over a bankrupt suicide. Mon ami may not survive in pest salons. The city glittered behind us as we paused on the chain bridge. Poirot's tiny figure was still. He kissed the glass himself, murmuring, and that kiss contained pride, spite, and ruin. He caused the disaster, not she. However, she will take the punishment. Then he quickly touched my arm. Come have cake at Gerbo Hastings. Even in catastrophe, the stomach must be fed. And remember that sometimes the dead are the most heinous murderers. Epilogue at the station. We did not stay long in Budapest. Poe had no patience for gossip disguised as justice, and we were on the northbound train in a matter of days. The Danube ran beside us, restless and grey, carrying secrets that the city preferred to conceal. We stopped in Vienna for a day, and Poirot abruptly came to a halt on the Westbahnhof platform. A woman in black furs and a man in a plain military coat stood in front of us, flanked by the second carriage. She was veiled, but I recognized the lofty carriage of her head. He carried her Val with the awkward compassion of a man who prefers to carry her anguish. Madame la Comtesse, Poirot muttered. She turned as if she anticipated him. For a brief while, the four of us stood isolated from the station's bustle, porters, whistles, and steam. Then she bowed her head, not as a queen, but as a woman who had survived destruction. Messier, she said quietly. We are heading for Trieste. Perhaps father could be anywhere except Pest. Farkas's hand tightened around hers. He said, we're going somewhere where her name is just a name. There was no reason for speeches. Poirot simply bowed, and in that gesture I sensed more gentleness than in all of his words that week. Then I wish you happiness, madam. Major. The guard's whistle sounded shrill. Farkas helped her get into the carriage. She leaned out the window one more time. Remember us kindly, she said, and the train pulled away, steam enveloping her face until she vanished. I found myself oddly moved. Poirot, I replied. Do you think they will ever be happy? He adjusted his cuff while watching the carriages vanish. Happiness, Hastings, is not a matter of world approval. It is two hearts that beat together in spite of the world. For them, yes, I think it is possible. He gave a brisk little sigh. Come, we will leave them their exile. At Demel's they have a Sasha torture that is, if not as sweet as romance, at least less perishable. And so we left the lovers to their future, one written not in scandal but in their own choosing. Music, and so concludes Poirot and the Countess's kiss, a tale of appearances and pride, where a lipstick smear, a grain of sugar, and a carefully staged gesture proved louder than gossip, and Poirot heard what vanity tried to hide. This story is our own invention, written in homage to Agatha Christie. and inspired by the real textures of Austro-Hungarian high society, its salons, scandals, and very public reputations. If you've listened until the end, thank you. Your presence, your reflections, and those simple gestures like comment, subscribe directly influence how the channel performs and what we're able to make next. I read what you share and try to reply whenever I can. If you'd like to support further, you can join our membership for ad-free episodes and extras, or leave a small tip via Buy Me a Coffee. Links are in the description. But truly, just being here and sharing the show is already a gift. Until our next mystery, good night.